Let's take you back to Ottawa. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre spoke to reporters this morning. Let's listen in.
What about the state of this relationship? It's been 5 months with no negotiations. Mr. Carney was elected with the main promise that he would deliver a victory faced with the Americans by eliminating tariffs. A year later, the tariffs have doubled and apply much more widely on products. We have the peer economy in the G7, the only one in decline, and Mr. Carney has delivered nothing. We are learning now that Mexico will start negotiations, formal negotiations with the U.S. While Mr. Carney has had no negotiations in 5 months. So these are illusions. The only speeches he's had is YouTube videos. So we've had illusions, nice words, meetings. To hold meetings. We need to counter the tariffs on aluminum, steel, softwood lumber, and cars, and Mr. Carney has failed completely in this area.
It's great. At the end of the day, though, what we need is action. Mark Carney was elected on the singular promise that he would negotiate a win with the Americans. Since that time, American tariffs have doubled and broadened on Canadian goods. Carney's given us the worst economy in the G7, the only shrinking economy in the G7. We're hemorrhaging jobs. Just 10 days ago, the Americans hit us with much bigger tariffs on products that include Canadian steel. And what has Mark Carney done, really, in a year on this? He hasn't held negotiations in 5 months. The Mexicans are going to be at the table formally with the Americans any day. The only talks that Mark Carney is doing are YouTube videos where he's comparing himself to Sir Isaac Brock and holding up little figurines in his office. So he told all of you the other day that with his new majority he was going to stop showboating. And then a few days later, he put out a showboating YouTube video, right? The 2.6 million Canadians whose jobs depend on getting rid of these terrible American tariffs have had about enough of Mark Carney making false promises and delivering the worst economy in the G7. And by the way, you were all very critical of me. You said that I needed to be more clear in my plans with Canada-US. I've laid out an extremely detailed plan to counter American tariffs and to fight for US trade. My position is clear. Build up leverage, use that leverage to get rid of American tariffs on aluminum, steel, autos, and lumber. What is Mark Carney's plan? What are his intentions? Has Mr. Carney even stated whether he wants to renew USMCA at all? He said yesterday trade with the U.S. is a big, or in his video, he said trade with the U.S. is a big weakness. So does that mean that he wants to end USMCA? If he wants it renegotiated, does he want a full overhaul? A few tweaks? What are his demands? Has he waved the right flag on getting rid of the tariffs on aluminum, steel, autos, and lumber? Or is he still fighting that fight? Does anybody know what Mark Carney's plan is? I don't, honestly, I mean, did anybody here know what his plan is?
You had previously suggested that there ought to be an all-party committee of some kind that would be tasked with answering exactly these questions and working in a consensus manner, I think. Do you still have that position, or do you think the majority government, that's not possible?
Sure, I think it's a great idea. But at the end of the day, what you need is to have a prime minister who's focused not on illusions and showboating, but on actually fighting the tariffs. We've got 2.6 million jobs that depend on getting rid of these tariffs. We have whole lumber towns that might disappear, towns that may not have any people in them in a couple of years if we don't get rid of softwood lumber tariffs. Windsor is reeling. A $16 billion industry in Windsor has just been smashed with increased tariffs on particularly mold making. Have you heard Mark Carney even mention it? He was busy waving around a figurine of Sir Isaac Brock, comparing himself to a 19th century war hero. And yet he doesn't have a single word to utter about the people of Windsor whose jobs are hemorrhaging in light of these new tariffs. He refuses to stand up against these wrong-headed American tariffs. He's done absolutely nothing on this file in the last year other than use it to stoke fear and distract from his catastrophic failings here at home. The worst food price inflation in the G7, the worst household debt in the G7, the worst housing costs in the G7, and the only shrinking economy in the G7. It's not surprising that he wants to distract with illusions with a record like that.
Pensez-vous, M. Poilievre, que nos liens avec les États-Unis représentent réellement une faiblesse?
Pardon?
Pensez-vous réellement que nos liens avec
Do
les
you
États-Unis
really
constituent une
think
faiblesse pour le Canada?
that our relations with the U.S. is a weakness for Quebec, for Canada? The question is, if you want to cancel sales of $16 billion, what will you replace it with? If truly. Mr. Carney had a year. He has not signed, he has not negotiated a single new agreement with another country. So the 2.6 million Canadians who rely on sales to the U.S., what will they do if Mr. Carney tries to eliminate this relation? I think we should fight for an agreement without tariffs. What's the alternative to that? I've presented a plan to negotiate, to fight for the elimination of tariffs. It's not because the U.S. or the president will be generous. I'm not naive. It's because we have leverage. We will be able to fight for tariff elimination. And another question here.
And on tariffs, he calls them, the best economic policy ever. Do you really think a tariff-free deal between Canada and the U.S. is possible?
Only if you use leverage. And we've got a lot of leverage. We've got 10 of the 12 NATO-defined critical minerals. The Americans desperately need those minerals, and the only way they can get guaranteed access to a reserve of them is if they give us tariff-free access to their marketplace. The only way that they can moderate gas and housing prices is by buying our oil and our lumber. So what I say is let's use our leverage to fight for what we want, which is tariff-free trade with the United States.
They've tried to impose tariffs and raise housing prices on their own citizens for 20, 30 years. Why do you think something would change now?
Well, it did change when Prime Minister Harper was in office. He was up against a very tough president, George W. Bush, and yet he managed to get a tariff-free deal on softwood lumber. And not only that, he got the Americans to reimburse the tariffs they had already collected. Ever since the Liberals have been in power, those tariffs have been reinstated. And ever since Mr. Carney took office, the lumber tariffs have tripled. Another catastrophic failure for a man who calls himself a master negotiator. So what you need to do is go to the Americans and say, this is the leverage we have, and we're going to use it, and we expect to have tariff-free trade in exchange.
Do you think that needs to change, that he needs to soften it? The Americans have been clear.
Not soften it, just get to work. He said the other day that he was going to stop showboating. Those were his words. And he was going to get serious. Well, a serious prime minister a year into this conflict would be able to tell you his plan. I've told you my plan. I've been very detailed in my plan. Nobody knows Mark Carney's plan, probably not even him. He hasn't even told us whether he wants to renew USMCA, and if he doesn't, okay, tell us how he's going to replace the $600 billion of exports. Tell the 2.6 million Canadians who rely on trade with the U.S. where their jobs are going to come from. So far, he hasn't done any of that. We're a year into this. He was elected on the single promise that he would negotiate a win with the U.S. And since that time, he's been losing. Double the tariffs on steel and aluminum, triple the tariffs on lumber, broadening of tariffs out to other products that weren't formerly covered. And he's done nothing to stop it other than to wave the white flag.
Mr. Carney,
He won't negotiate in public because...
I'm not saying he should negotiate in public, but he should tell us what his plan is to fight American tariffs and to get tariff-free access to the U.S. That's what he should be doing now.
Si jamais, monsieur, si jamais...
Qu'est-ce qu'il a fait? Sauf qu'accepter des tarifs
With the leverage,
doublés.
except from accepting double tariffs on aluminum and steel and triple on lumber. And the tariffs have broadened to other products that weren't covered before. There's been no negotiations since 5 months, while Mexico is making progress. So there'll be a time where 2.6 million...
That's Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre speaking to reporters this morning in Ottawa, calling out the Liberal government for not reaching any form of Canada-U.S. trade deal. This as the Prime Minister announced a new Canada-U.S. Advisory Council, but Pierre Poilievre says what we need more now is action from the Carney Liberals, particularly on fighting the tariffs.